Bullshit.
It's the No BS Marketing Show. I'm Dave Mastovich, CEO and founder of Massolutions, the world's only no bullshit marketing firm. It's a year-end guest rewind for 2019. Today, in this episode, I want to go back throughout the year and give you a clip from each guest of the No BS Marketing Show in 2019, the words of wisdom from our fantastic guests. When I interviewed Dr. Janet Stout, President and Director of Special Pathogens Laboratory, I wanted to learn more about her leadership style. In this clip, you'll hear how she equates her leadership to that of a biology story and how playing sports growing up taught her the team mentality she still uses today.
I forgot to tell you. My first semester at Clarion, I was a business major. Okay, does that make sense? But I was like, I don't like this. And so after one semester, I went knocking over to the biology department, and the chairman looks at me really strange, and he says, "You know, we get a lot of people transferring out of biology into business. Not so many people coming the other way." So I my second semester and going forward, I was a biology major, and then I found out, there's a lot of laboratories and chemistry and physics, and I just, after a year of basketball trying to fit all that in, I decided I can't do both. So after the second year, I gave up basketball. That's when I tried my hand at tennis, and then I said, look, I have to get serious about the science here and not do it. But what it taught me was, what does it mean to be a leader? Not only do you have to see the whole court, so to speak, but you also have to be someone that people will follow. And some of it's natural, and then some of it is learned. And I think that was my leadership proving ground.
And what's your style with your team? How do you go about leading? You hear these all kinds of different leadership styles based on, they always give an example of someone and say that's an autocratic leader, that's a laissez-faire leader, this is an empowering leader. Like, just what's your general approach to it?
Well, I'll describe it because I can't really think of a word. So after I describe it, Dave, maybe you can tell me what it is. As I said, I think I have good vision. I kind of see where I want to go, but I highly value the people around me and the perspective and knowledge that they bring. So I make sure that I hear from the key people on the team and then make the decision. So I'm not looking for consensus so much, although it's inclusion, but I'm very good at like see, do. Okay, so somebody has to make a decision. I'm good at doing that. And so I think that's part of the reason why I'm leading this group. And, I've been doing some work on leadership, not styles, but organization. And they have the visionary and the integrator and all of that. And certainly I play the visionary role. So I pull all this information together. Stephen Covey's famous "Begin with the End in Mind,"
yes,
which is such a powerful thing. And so I think that would best describe how I approach things. It's very humble, and maybe I learned a little of that from Dr. Yu, babysitting the residents' children. Like everything that needs to be done, anybody should do it, right? It's not like there's a class system or a hierarchy. We're all in this together. I just have different skills that you do, and so I'm kind of like the captain of the ship.
I like that, and I share some of that leadership style, and I think that it's much more prevalent today. I think 15 years ago and 25 years ago, that was way less because the command and control could still work in the 80s, even into the 90s, but now you have to really have the inclusive, collaborative approach. So I think that's interesting. And
how does that work for you?
The same way. It's interesting. I mean, there's that with anything that you do, in any style, any approach has weaknesses too. So there's times where inclusiveness and bouncing ideas off is fantastic, and getting to a consensus and moving forward. And then there's other times where maybe it took longer, when I was taking a little bit too long to make a decision, or I'm a fiercely loyal person. So there have been times where I was loyal and took longer than I should have to kind of move in a different direction, or to say, okay, this is your role now. The organization's here and you're not there, that kind of stuff, at multiple stops along the way. And the interesting thing about leaders, what I see is we do end up having the same patterns, good and bad, throughout our career, because it's really difficult to just change who you are. Arnie Berkey is a respected healthcare leader, and in his episode of the No BS Marketing Show, we talked about everything from building and scaling a business to the importance of taking the time to ask questions and listen in order to grow. In this clip, he gives 2 book suggestions for leaders of businesses big and small, and why he believes in the power of behavioral assessments. So the show's about leadership and communications. You exemplify it, and it's impressive to hear, and really enjoyed hearing it. I want to make sure I do throw out the one question I always like to ask is, what's a tool that you think you've used over the course of your career that might help members of our audience? It can be anything from how you organize and plan your day, how you set priorities. It could be an app. What's a tool you think would help our audience?
Yeah, I think everyone should apply. If you get the book Rockefeller Habits, and then Scaling Up is the second version that came out, it condenses a lot of what I learned in the fellowship. Everyone has different ways and methods. I learned some of the stuff that the big guys at Westinghouse and IBM were doing when I went through my fellowship. But that book really distills it, gives you great templates. Any size company can use it, and it gets you focused. And it gets you focused on the right stuff when you're a business. So I think that one is key. The other thing I would add is behavioral assessments. I think every company should be doing behavioral assessments, looking into multiple dimensions in their recruitment and their team building, and taking that as a tool to really understand what are the motivators. Because there's more to people than you realize. There's a lot going on subconsciously, and these assessments are amazing. And so I just give a pitch. People Keys, I've used them since 2002. I have them now applied into the 3 businesses that I'm invested in or advisory boards, because it works. So I would say, if you marry those 2 up, it gives a lot of clarity to the business. Those are tools that I really believe in.
Mike Cherok is president and CEO of AE Works, an architectural engineering firm based in downtown Pittsburgh that's been recognized in a lot of ways, including Smart Business 50, Best Places to Work, Top Design Firms, and Fastest Growing Companies. I believe these successes are a credit to his attention to the culture of his company. Listen in as Mike explains what the triple bottom line means, why he places such an emphasis on company culture, and why June 4th, 2012 was the worst business day of Mike's career. AE Works is a different type of architectural firm in that it's architectural and engineering, and it's been recognized as such. And it also has something called the triple bottom line, and that is actually even tied to your logo. Tell us the story about those 2.
So, culture, what the business stands for, to me is as important as what the business does. And so we started off, it didn't happen right away. I call the first couple of years in business, there's survival. It's just kind of like just get down and get dirty and get into the game and, fight your way through it to establish yourself. So, the first couple of years I was really focused in on, clients, right? Get clients, get work. And of course, 2008, 9, everybody knows what happened then. I'm thinking, oh man, but it turns out to be a blessing in disguise. I'm willing to go where the work is, work harder than the next guy. I like to make that kind of commitment. So that taught me a lot. And in those first couple of years, that was the focus. But as we started to establish ourselves and hire people and start to scale, it became apparent to me, not by my own recognition, but by people who worked for the company, some of which still work at the company to this day, that the organization has to stand for something. Like we need to have some kind of identity beyond just what it is we provide. And so I go to work. That's what I do. When people come up with good ideas and my staff have the best ideas, and I go to work and try to find what those, what's out there. So as I started researching that, and I did a series of personal visioning exercises internally at the company, where this came to light. This idea of the company having an identity. In my research, I discovered triple bottom line companies, triple bottom line businesses, and companies that are not just for profit, but they're for good. And so as I started researching that and trying to get some scholarship on that subject, I would engage with my staff, and we started going through some training. And just so happened at that time in 2012, June 4th, 2012 to be exact, there was a day that the company, it was like the worst day professionally I've ever had, where the company, financially kind of flipped. There were a lot of things going on I wasn't aware of. And that day, which I can remember, I have in my calendar as a constant reminder, was the most evident to me of how valuable that culture is, how valuable what you stand for is as compared to what you provide. And I had not addressed it. I was doing some research around it, but it was not full force. And so after that day and in the months ahead, I worked, my ass off to make sure that we didn't lose the business and I wouldn't disappoint so many people and the people who were working hard in the company. I got rid of those people in the company, to be blunt, who were, contributors to the kind of chaos that was ensuing. But most importantly, I worked on myself and worked on what it is that, my role is and what it is I should be doing as a CEO of the company. And I made a pledge to my staff then that I keep to this day, which is that I will always own the culture. And by that, I mean that I'm responsible for that. So if you find yourself working in an environment at AE Works that you're not proud of, I need to know that. We need to discuss it. I may not agree with it. People do come and go. Not everybody's a fit for companies. They work a couple years. Maybe they're not the right, but we're going to have an honest conversation. And at the end of the day, if it's wrong, I own it. And if it's right, I own it, and then I'm not looking to shed that or give that to somebody or delegate that. And I think every CEO of any company, every founder, anybody who runs companies owns that culture. And it's not something you can delegate,
and when you realize something's amiss and you go, oh, look what I've created. Because that's what I've gone through multiple times. I'm going through right now is you go, oh, so I've created this issue with communication because I was signaling that somehow unintentionally. And so you're right. We have to own it. Petros Neofotistos knows how to capitalize on Amazon retail arbitrage so much that he started Granitza, an e-commerce retailer and brand management consulting company. I love to challenge my guests to think of a time when they were the BSer and hear what they did to change their ways and learn from it. Listen in as Petros talks about how he had to fight ideas of grandeur to recalibrate and nail down his process. Now, it is the No BS Marketing Show, so I do have to ask you the one question is, when were you a BSer, when you were either the difficult employee, the tough boss, the tough strategic partner / vendor? When was your leadership or communication maybe lacking? What did you learn from it? How did you fix it? What did you learn from it?
So this is sort of an ongoing process. I feel like I'm so early in the process. I've listened to some of your other guests, and they've been doing this for so long. For me, it's very recent. It's when I first started my company, I had these ideas of grandeur. It almost became a vanity project more than a business at first because I was so proud of it, and I wanted everyone to see it, and I wanted it to grow so fast. And what I didn't do at first is focus on the actual products and the service and, the reason the customers would hire me in the first place. And I got myself in a little trouble because I ended up being a pretty good salesman, but not the processes weren't in place to sort of back up what I was selling. So I've really spent the last few months nailing down those processes to make sure that, those mistakes don't happen again.
Good. Now, another thing I always ask is, it is about leadership and communication. So talk a little bit about your leadership style and how you like to communicate best.
Sure. So I don't have to be just a leader necessarily for my business, which I am. I have to be a leadership on a lot of these projects as well, because I'm the subject matter expert on this. So I have to make sure to get buy-in from the important people in the businesses that I'm trying to help. If the people that make the decisions aren't in, they don't have the same goals to match the vision that I'm trying to create for them, it falls apart quick. So what I have to do is make sure that I communicate exactly what I see as the solution, and make sure that everyone is on board with that, and more specifically on board with how long it might take to get there. Because sometimes you have to sacrifice your short-term goals to reach your 1-year or 5-year goals that you want to reach. So that's the leadership that I try to take.
How do you effectively communicate with others? That's the question Vistage Chair Clyde Horner answered during his episode of the No BS Marketing Show. In this clip, he talks about the tactics that have led to his communication success. Talk about the other side. Talk about some of your biggest communication successes. What are things that you used over the years again and again? Maybe it was the cadence or frequency of how you communicated. Maybe it was the format. It was a certain style of meeting. What were the things? You talked about the walking around at that one job, how it changed the game for you just by walking around and talking to people a couple of days a week. What are your most successful communication approaches?
In the Vistage arena, I've come to know several people that have a conversation model. Susan Scott, in 2000 or so, wrote a book called Fierce Conversations that helped me develop a model of a conversation, how to start it, how to end it. And Edgar Papke, who is one of my closest friends, who is a Vistage speaker, has a conversation model also that I'm really encouraging members to use, and myself. And it's a real challenge because I have to stay with the model, and it's very easy to get away from it. It starts with an intention statement, and that's the intentions is, why are we sitting here or standing here talking to each other? Most of the time when we start a conversation, we go busting into somebody's office or our home with our spouse and say, we got a problem, we got to sit down and talk about this right now. It scares the other person to death. The walls go up, big guns come out, and we don't talk about anything important. And Edgar has helped me realize that every conversation, or important or valuable conversation, needs to start off with an intention statement, which is a relationship statement about, I'd like to spend the next 30 minutes having a conversation with you. So when we leave, you and I and our employees or our customers or clients can function at the highest level possible, or the highest level we've ever functioned before. And just get permission. Can we do that? And most people will say yes. And then I start off with my view of the world or whatever is going on, and share my concerns and fears. And then I ask the person sitting across from me to do the same thing. And I don't interrupt them. I ask them not to interrupt me. Then we can, after we tell each other what's really going on and how we see things, we can come to some shared understandings, and just one or two. And then after we do that, we can come up with one or two solutions. And then after that, we come up with who's going to do what, the commitments from myself and the commitment from the other person. And finally, we agree to come back next week or 2 weeks from now and test what our new agreements are. And I've found that that's the only way to have conversations.
There's something different about Strata architecture, and it's a credit to the culture they've created and cultivated. Listen in as Ed Shriver, a founding partner of the firm, talks about their philosophy and how a strategic planning retreat gave him clarity on their mission. tell the culture that this is not a cookie cutter, volume-based architectural firm.
Yeah, I think that's true. And thank you. I'm glad that shows. There's sort of maybe three silos. One is the cookie cutter, repetitious, make money things, McDonald's. Once you got McDonald's down, you can make a lot of money doing McDonald's. On the other end of the spectrum is the architect who doesn't really care what the client thinks. It's their project and they own it. And honest to God, I have heard architects say, he hired me to do the job. Now get the hell out of the way and I'll design it. And that's the other end of the spectrum, mostly because they don't get a lot of repeat clients. But that's the other side. We're more in the middle. I feel strongly that Strata is not so much a design firm as it is a creative firm, that we look to resolve those issues in the most creative way possible to meet all of the requirements. In fact, we had strategic planning retreat last week, and the example I used is IDEO, is a creative design firm. It's not so much about what these iPhones look like, it's the fact that there was no conception of this until IDEO conceived of it. That's what I think Strata is that kind of combination of technical and artistic and practical and budget all together. How do you make all of those pieces work? If it's just beautiful and it's not code compliant, it doesn't matter. Or you can't afford it, doesn't matter. So I think the key, at least for me and for Strata,
Find the
is
penny.
focus on creativity.
That's a lesson Lisa Rios, CEO of the LDI Group and Vistage Chair, learned early on in her career that taught her the importance of discipline and attention to detail. Find the penny. In her episode, she also talks about buying into a mission and why it's okay to make mistakes and learn from them.
So you learn discipline at a very young age and attention to detail because you want to show them that the young person can handle it, and you were then counted on.
Yeah. And then when I came to California, I ended up working for this lady, Barbara Matthews, and I'll never forget her. And she taught me that we used to have to reconcile pools, distribution pools for the citrus industry. I was in the citrus industry for several years. And it was all done manual at the time. And she would make me look for 1 penny. If we were off a penny with $1 million, I'd have to find that penny. And I searched and searched and searched that penny. So I actually learned really early on how to find clerical errors, financial errors, those types of things and stuff. She really taught me the value of discipline. That was huge. In the company that I worked with, where we grew over 500% in 5 years, that was run, the owners were Canadian, and it was Marlon and Julian Carlson. And some of the things that they taught me was the true spirit of entrepreneurship, because they allowed me to do whatever I needed to do to make it happen and didn't put me in a box. And they taught me what entrepreneurship was about, what leadership was about. And so even though we all had competing priorities, I had the ability to learn from them, because they had a way of teaching me and everyone that worked with them how to buy in to their vision, how to take ownership of what I was responsible for. And it was okay to make a mistake. It was okay to learn from that. And it just taught me a lot.
Dr. Kyle Smart is partner and chief medical officer of the Cucamonga Valley Medical Group. In this clip from his episode of the No BS Marketing Show, he talks about the importance of self-awareness and how he challenged himself to be a good administrator, even though he's wired to be a physician.
One of the things you thought was maybe leads to bad business meant for business people, I should say for physicians, is that trial and error is used a lot. And I think that can be good in business. Talk to me about business being similar and also business being different from practicing medicine, because I know physicians are data driven. Anytime we're trying to communicate with physicians for any other client, because some of our clients are out to reach you, they're out to reach physicians. We've always said they're data driven, get to the point with some facts and move on. How is that trial and error? Was that trial and error embedded in your DNA from being a physician, and then it's different, when you apply it to business it can have more pratfalls, or are you practicing business different than the way you practice medicine?
So one of the big tools that I've learned and has helped me, and maybe this will come up later, is behavioral assessment, which is different than personality assessment. So we use a behavioral assessment called the DISC assessment, and the D and the I and the S and the C stand for various different behavioral types. My behavioral type is very wired for physician, and I have had to learn a whole new way of processing and a whole new way of behaviors and skill sets to be a successful administrator.
Give me a couple examples.
That's a good one. So I know that I'm an SI, and that's great for patient care because I am very empathetic and compassionate, and I get in the trenches with my patients and really help them solve their problems. And it's not just the medical problems. So I tell students all the time that I work with, it's more than just being a good provider these days. You have to help patients navigate the healthcare system, this crazy atrocity that we have in 2019. And so when I say I get in the trenches and help patients, it's certainly to manage their medical issues, but it's also figuring out insurance and what kind of insurance they have, Medi-Cal or Medicaid, an HMO, a PPO, and then which medications are covered, which aren't, where do we send them for x-ray or lab, what specialists can they see based on the insurance they have. We used to think of PPO as carte blanche. You can't get an MRI anymore with a PPO insurance unless you jump through hurdles that we used to only think applied to HMO, such as an x-ray and physical therapy before an MRI. But it's navigating the psychosocial things for patients as well. In the business arena, I think the D and C part of the behavioral assessment, I find that most of my colleagues that are CEOs and run businesses have high levels of D and C, and I have some dominant or D in me, but I can't stand C. I color outside the lines and bend the rules all the time. So,
Thanks for listening to this special episode of the No BS Marketing Show, the 2019 Guest Rewind episode, recorded in our own studios in bold, beautiful, downtown Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Remember, ask yourself, what's the big idea? And build your story around the answer. It's all about bold solutions, no BS. And Happy New Year.